Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real Texas parents about what's going on in our schools. Today, I am joined by Belew, a mom of 2, John Petree, a father of 9, and Brandon Hodges, a father of 1. We're going to jump into what's going on in the education system all across Texas, as well as focus in on Midland ISD. Y'all, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Good to see you.
Kara, I'm going to start with you as a mom of 1. You've been in the education trenches for years and years and years, and now you are serving, you're one of the founding board members of Texans for Excellence in Education, which again is the alternative to TASBY, and we encourage every school board across the Texas to seek out the great work that y'all are doing at T. So let's talk to you a little bit about why you joined the T board and what you are looking forward to do, especially in the realm of helping school boards understand the role of administrators and superintendents.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yes, I worked for about 20 years in education policy, both with Governor Perry and Governor Abbott. Mm-hmm. I had the wonderful opportunity to join T, and really our mission is to empower school boards to understand that they are in charge of children's lives and dreams, and that their number one job is to make sure students are learning in the classroom every single day. And right now in Texas, we don't have that happening, unfortunately. There are millions and millions of children sitting in Texas classrooms right now who are not reading at grade level. And we've got to do something to improve that. But our number one mission, too, is to let board members know that they are the most important leaders in their community. They are in charge of taxes. They are in charge of children's dreams. They are in charge of the economic realities for their community. And so there's so much impact you can have as a school board leader. And if you are willing to step up to the plate and take that leadership position, you can change the lives of generations and all of Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being here. John, you've joined me before. We talked a lot about T and the great work that you're doing. So for any of our viewers that want to hear even more about the opportunities that you provide and how they can get out of the TASBY cabal, the TASBY cartel, I would say, that controls so many aspects of education and not for the better. But talk to us a little bit about why you started T and the growth that you've seen with more and more school districts like Mr. Hodges that have said, we want out of TASBY, we want to be in an organization that supports the values of Texans.
Sure. Well, thank you. Also, thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the last time we spoke, T represented school districts representing about, somewhere around 8,000 to 10,000 kids. And we're at the 250,000 student mark now. Of districts that we work with at some significant level. Mm-hmm. Those participations vary from district to district, but we've had immense growth over the last 2 years. And I'm excited to be here today because as Kara said, T definitely has its roots in representing the values and culture of Texans and getting those cultural issues to the forefront and reflecting policy that exemplifies that. But what's exciting about this next step of T work is utilizing policy to actually affect student outcomes. School boards, for so long, school board members, they've been trained and indoctrinated to think that their hands are tied, that they only get to hire the superintendent and approve a budget. That is just not true. In the work that we're seeing trailblazed in Midland to actually affect student outcomes, students reading in a kindergarten classroom, because board policy was implemented. It's very exciting work.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm so thrilled to hear about the growth because we need more and more school districts that are taking the bold leap to come and join those that share the values of Texans. So that's fantastic. And now we're going to turn to kind of what I'd say is the star of the show, the president of the Midland ISD School Board, Brandon Hodges. Brandon, thank you for joining us. I would love to hear first and foremost, why did you run for school board?
Well, first off, I want to thank the Texas Public Policy Foundation for having me, because this is a dream. What a beautiful building. What an unbelievable opportunity it is to be here. When you come in the front doors, it gave me... sometimes you feel when you're dealing with education policy that you're alone on an island, and you walk through the doors and you see just the floor, come and take it. And it reminds me, all right, well, let's get to the fight of it. Let's start putting some lead down range.
Got big pictures of the Alamo.
Yeah, it's the place is...
inspire you.
You could make this almost a museum. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful building.
Thank you. We're glad to have you.
No, I wanted to run for the school board. I had seen, it's kind of, to make it short and sweet, I guess, is I've got a little brother and a little sister, and both of them struggled with education. But so I had a little brother, and he really struggled with dyslexia and dysgraphia growing up. And he was a smart kid, and he passed away in 2010. But he just did not get the resources that he needed, and it was I'm quite a bit older than he is, but I flew through school. I was reading encyclopedias at a very young age, and my parents didn't have a problem educating me. They had a problem with me going to class. I have a problem with compulsory mandated attendance. But anyhow, I ran for the school board because I saw my brother struggle, and I had top cover. My grandmas went to college. My dad was the executive VP. My mom was a master's degree teacher in education. So I had all this top cover going through school, and I saw what our family had gone through, and I was like, wow, I've got some serious top cover coming in here. I can't imagine. My buddy Wes from the South Side, we roped goats together, literally roped goats together in Southside Midland. But he didn't have the same advantages that I had grown up with, and I just knew that if I had all this top cover and all these folks that were really at bat for me all the time, that these kiddos that are coming from the South Side and East Side of Midland had absolutely no hope whatsoever. And so it was a very weird thing. Education is very, very important. It's a force multiplier. It opens up opportunities for you across the board. I've been able to experience some wonderful things that are very, very unique, I think, in my lifetime, and it goes back to my education. And I ran because I saw this struggle, and I said, if I'm ever in the position to have the opportunity to run, I'm going to run for school board, and I'm going to change it, and I'm going to change it one district at a time. I went from being in Midland to Levelland to Austin, San Marcos to Nashville, working with some of the biggest rock bands and Americana artists on planet Earth, and that's because I can read, write, and do basic arithmetic. So that's why I ran.
Yeah, that's great, and that is what we need. We need more Texans that see that we've got to get back to the basics of education. And something that I've heard you talk about a lot is reading. Kara touched on this. We have literally millions of children that are sitting in our classrooms. If 47% of the kids cannot read on grade level, and we have over 5.5 million kids, we're looking at over 2.5 million kids that cannot read on grade level, and that's horrifying. So let's talk about kind of what you saw in Midland and what you all have worked together on to course correct what could be called a failing system, a failing system that is failing kids, that is failing to prepare them to launch into their life, reach their full potential, and continue the Texas miracle that we all enjoy today.
Well, first off, I think that it is very, very important that we recognize that there is a problem. We have to have a moment of truth. We have to agree, regardless of all the other things that we can argue about. We have to come together and say, okay, we can talk about all these other factors, but first off, can we agree that reading and educating these kids is good? Yeah. And if the answer to that is yes, then we can move on and we focus on that. So when you have that moment of truth, everybody agrees to, yes, this is important. We've got to get these kids reading. You can't deny the taper reports. I mean, you start looking at how many kids that were failing all the way, 3rd through 12th, but you get into the pre-K academies, you get into the K through 2nd grade, and we have just in Midland at our campuses, it depends on the campus, but we've got kids that are, 70% of the campus isn't on grade level. And if you can't read, if you can't do that basic foundational principle, everything else is mute, because that is the building block, not only of those kids being able to survive in our world, in the American system of government and the Texan system of government, but they also can't thrive in the world that God has given us. And it's a gift. Like it's really, really pretty when you're able to start reading, and you can sit, for me, because I'm old, but all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, all things bright and beautiful. I would read those books constantly younger. I used to want to be a vet. That didn't work out. Now we just have a zoo at our house and don't get paid for it. But once...
So, no, are you talking about your 9 kids or their animals?
No.
I'm the 9 kids.
He's got the 9 kids.
Okay.
No, but it's so important to read. And when you walk around your local communities, you don't have to be an education expert and go through the TAPER reports to see how absolutely horrendous we're doing. All you got to do is walk to your local mall and just ask the kids. You can feel it.
Yeah.
You can literally feel it that we're not doing right by kids. And I'm going to go even further for people that are watching this show. And if you're serious about fixing this problem and you really want free market systems and capital, all the things that we love in Texas, you better get serious on fixing education. Yeah. Because if you don't, it's all going to crumble. Nobody can read the policy, none of it. But you don't have to be able to do that. You literally just have to go to the mall and do it. Because I think, to bolt on to what you said, I think we're in such a crisis in Texas that it is almost, if we do not fix it, the people that are in leadership roles, I think they are part of a conspiracy for systematic child abuse. I think it is that level of everyone is getting rich and the kids are not being able to read, and it is unacceptable, and I will fight. I will literally, you will put me in the ground before I stop fighting for that.
Well, God bless you for that perspective, and I'm right there with you. And we're going to get to how so many people are getting rich. I know Midland just went out for massive bonds. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But I do want to get to when you joined the school board, were you all utilizing T already? Or
no, we were. Okay. So it's all TASBY,
right?
And you got to get rid of TASBY. Texas Association of School Board is the biggest fraud ever. I've been on the school board for 2 years. I became president in November of 2024. I've never had anyone from TASBY send me an email, phone call, text message, send me a carrier pigeon.
Who do they talk to?
They talk to the superintendent. I mean, that's just how it is.
And what does TASBY tell our school board members who that they answer to?
I have no idea. I don't talk to TASBY. So the director was coming in, and we postponed it or what have you, because I made a deal in the agenda review. I said he can come, but he's got to do 2 dates. He can come before session ends, but he's got to come back after session ends. And he's a coward, and he didn't want to come.
So you have seen, as most Texans have seen, over their kind of control. I think they've been around for over 75 years, but really in the past 20 years, their control, not just on the regulations, but they do the energy co-op, the investment pool, where they're making massive fees, billions of dollars of fees, holding the fund balances.
Procurement books,
the procurement policy,
insurance,
the buy book, the insurance, all of that, which I want to shift to. So you knew going in what the majority of Texans know, and it is a racket that we have set up a system that this one entity has all their tentacles and everything that provides services to schools. So you all moved over to T.
I literally, let me throw this in on TASBY, because I want the executive director to hear this. I literally made TASBY a talking point of my campaign, and I won every precinct by almost 70%. Wow. And then I flipped the entire board. Yeah. And a talking point was to get rid of TASBY. And here we are with T.
What did you hear? I am curious. If you made it a central point of campaigning for the school board, what were you saying or what were you hearing? Because I hear stories all the time from, we talked about the fact that they brought in the CEO of one of the largest lobbying/financial firms here in Texas, and he said don't give teacher pay raises at their summer leadership conference to 2 different panels. So what did
Which consultant
you hear?
Is this? They've had like a dozen or so work in the Capitol the last 6 months. I think that's another reason the executive director, it's hard to get him scheduled when he was busy lobbying during session.
Yeah, that's the truth. But so what did you hear when you were out? Because we say this, it's kind of just everybody knows they're a problem. The legislators know they're a problem. The leadership knows they're a problem. School boards know there's a problem, but they still do service over 90% of school boards, right? So what were you hearing? Why did people, or what were people saying that we all just kind of know innately that TASBY is just this monolithic entity that controls and siphons money out of classrooms?
Well, so are you asking me like what my talk, like how I got people's attention on the campaign about TASBY?
Yes, or what were they telling you about TASBY? Because clearly it resonated.
They don't know anything about TASBY, or the majority of the rank and file voters don't. But essentially what I told it was about local control. Our education should be locally controlled. It is locally controlled in the state of Texas. And I had to go educate a bunch of voters and say, hey, we've got TASBY. And then you can go into how they converge with TASA. But you've got TASBY who is essentially stripped away your local control.
That's right.
Because they hire your superintendent, they set the policies, they do the training for the trustees. And so when I said, we've got, elect me, believe in me, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to claw back the authority that we've ceded to TASBY and to the state and to the feds and bring it back to us to locally control, to be able to determine our future. And one of the biggest things, so I'd gone to some trainings prior to at one of our region centers, and I was sitting in this training, the guys, it just went all over me, like just hot oil. I could not, and I literally got into Mr. Petree. I told him this story because he knows the guy, but I got into a disagreement with him because at the training, it was just myself and there was another lady in there, and she was going on another school board, and they already kind of think I'm weird because they're like, why are you here? And I'm like, to learn, right? Lifelong learner. And so he's going through and he's training the trustees on what our roles are. And he goes through these talking points, and he's essentially like, well, you set the tax rate, you hire superintendent, and you want to keep the kids safe, and that's pretty much it. And I was like, what now? And so we start talking about inputs and outputs, and that kind of gets into a story.
And let me interject one thing here, because Mandy, I think this is something important to note. Statutorily, the very first thing that a school board trustee is
yes,
the very first thing that's put in front of them in regards to training is this training, this orientation to the code that can only be provided by education service centers, period. They are the only people that can do this work. And this is what they get. So these are the very first words. These are common citizens that have run for a new seat on a board. They don't have any background. They don't have, the foundation and policy to even know what they're hearing. And the very first thing is, these are the two things you do.
There was nothing about education there. There was literally nothing about it.
That's what they tell you, though.
They will spend all of their time talking to you about bonds and cafeterias and football teams. And when you ask them how much time in your training was spent talking about, can kids read in any of the classrooms? How many of your kids were reading last year? Are you going to improve it next year? What's the plan to do that? School boards are devoid of any training on how to help their school systems actually improve outcomes for kids. And instead, it's a lot of just minutia about things that are just not focused on children and education. And one of the things that I'll really hit on is, and we talked about it, is hiding the ball in education. Instead of just saying, we don't have a lot of children reading in our classrooms right now. Our job is to get kids reading. Our job is to get kids doing math. How are we going to do that and be effective with it? They're never given any training. They're not even told, school board members aren't even told how many kids can read, and that your mission is to help your children learn so they can be productive citizens. And until we completely reverse that trend and start focusing every key leader in this state on the school boards on how do we focus on kids, how are we transparent with what's really happening, nothing can change. And that starts with, how are they being introduced to education, and what does that training even start with?
100%. So that's what.
And they started, and you can take it up to a year or 6 months. I have to go read the code, but 6 months to a year before you're elected. So the people that the cabal, the education cabals in your local communities, when they start mentoring and going out to find somebody to replace or they want on the board, they send them to TASBY trainings prior to. So you are already entrenched in the psychological manipulation tactics and half-truths that they tell you. And I just want to add, there's 15, these are the 15 things codified in Texas law that we're a school board member on top of other things it's supposed to do.
Does the first thing say science of reading?
No, it's specific powers and duties of boards, and that's why I got into an argument with that guy, is because I said there's much more to this than what you're telling us. And they try and convince you that all you should do is hire the superintendent, hold the superintendent accountable, and set a budget. That's really it. And I just disagree with that. We are the business. In Midland, Texas, we're not a business, we're the business in Midland, Texas. We've got 30,000 kids that are, minor kids in our schools. We have our own transportation system, our own police force. We've got 3,000 employees, a $400 million annual budget, billions of dollars sitting under our capital asset umbrella. We've got 4 million square feet of brick and mortar, another million square feet of brick and mortar coming online in 2028 with a $1.415 billion bond that I did not support, did not vote for, but elections have consequences that we have to manage. We have depressed commodity pricing going on in Midland, so there's going to be less available tax dollars based on our valuations for the taxing entities to split. We've got all these pressure, and you say all that to say we are the business in Midland, and our business should be getting the kids to read. And for all of those capital assets, like our market capitalization would be probably the number one largest market cap publicly traded company in Midland, and we suck. We are failing kids miserably. There's no way. The shareholders would absolutely revolt, and they should. So sorry.
No, you're saying the quiet part out loud. They should revolt. The parents should revolt. They have got to stop focusing on, you're talking about the projects, the buildings, the stadiums. That does nothing when your child exits their 13 years in the school system and launches out into the world if they still can't read.
Well, and the taxpayers of Texas. I mean, we pay enormous property taxes, and we also invest tons, billions and billions of dollars of debt is incurred to build school buildings.
Right.
And so we have a lot of fancy buildings out there, but our children cannot read.
That's right.
And it is not fair to be taking money like this from the Texas taxpayers and getting no return on investment. And it is deplorable. It really is.
Yeah, we absolutely have got to see massive reforms in the next legislative session because we keep giving this property tax relief. Y'all remember 2 years ago, it was the historic $18 billion in property tax relief. That has been eaten up. It's gone. Just for our viewers who don't realize, we have $500 billion. Well, it's more than $500 billion since May, but $500 billion in bond debt. And in May of 2025, we passed another $41.3 billion. The majority of it is ISD debt. And that is going back to, we've talked about this, the profiteer class, the private equity firms that own the architecture, engineering, and construction firms that are coming in. They are selling the vision of a Taj Mahal. They are using deceptive and manipulative messaging. Excuse me. And they are selling this idea that this is for the children. It's always for the children. It's for the community. We're the largest employer. Don't you want to have a massive football stadium for Friday Night Lights? And to your point, and to all of our point at this table, we want children to be able to read. We want them to know history. We want them to know what made Western civilization great. The values that were the foundation that
and
the founding fathers
of
used.
Our republic.
That's right, to create the republic. And what has made us great, I talk about this all the time, we are a baby. We are not even 250 years old yet. And now at the federal level, we're approaching almost $40 trillion in debt. And at the local level, we have over $500 billion in debt. This is unsustainable for all of our children. So when you went to T, what did you all focus on, and what are you trying to accomplish to say, Midland, we are the business, as you put it? How did you all work together to create a vision that would put you on a path to not continue to in debt and thereby enslave your property taxpayers and also fail your children to launch? What was your all's plan? What is your plan that you've put into place so that others that are watching this from around the state can say, I want to do that too?
Well, so first off, let me say you've got to put together a long-term vision, and it starts with building your team. And so we built out our team of possible school board members that wanted to run. And so we put people on the board and started, it was like drinking from a water or a fire hose for some of them. But we put together that team. And I want to specifically thank Dr. Matt Freeze, Mr. Joshua Gwynn, my vice president, Angel Hernandez, my secretary, and then Michael Booker for standing up for kids too. As well. We voted in these new policy lists of 5-2 vote. And so we've got to put together a great team. You have to communicate with precision and clarity, because as soon as you start this process, even before T came in the picture, because of the platform that I ran on and the messaging and education you have to give to people, you're going to create chaos because you're moving people's cheese. And so you have to, it's kind of two fronts. You have to at least attempt to build trust with the educrat cabal. And then you have to absolutely communicate with your team and these school board members on what you're trying to do. Because if you don't, during the chaos, everything is going to break down. So once we got a great team put together and we got them elected, we got on the horn with Mr. Petree, and we went through the process of saying, hey, well, this needs to be policy driven. This needs to be based on principles and not personality. That way it has sustainability and we can really focus on moving these kids where they need to be.
What were the principles, real quick? What did you run on? What did you put together the team on?
So our main thing was to focus back to the basics: math, reading, and basic reading, writing, and basic arithmetic were like the three key pillars on it. And it was to get back to the basics. And once you start explaining to people that what we're supposed to be doing is already, for the most part, codified in state law, but it's hidden and you're not trained about it and there's a lot of information. What we really did is we got with John and said, hey, this is our mission, is to get kids at grade level. We don't care. Closing the gap in growth is wonderful. There's a purpose for domain 2, but it doesn't have sustainable, life-changing things, right? It's domain 1. Are you at grade level? And John has a passion for kids, and he has been working for the other side for a long time, and so he had institutional knowledge on it. And then we went out and we looked for a school attorney. And one thing I think that God played a big part in putting together this team, because we had went to hire a different attorney and it did not work out. The community was really upset about that. And then I said, well, I don't have any brand loyalty to this. So we got rid of it, told John what happened. And one thing led to another, and then we get to hire Miss Belew, and it's like all these God just put together a really strong team of people with all different personalities and different perspectives. But you go back to that MOT, or that moment of truth. Are we all focused, and do we believe that our mission is to get kids reading at grade level? And we all do. And so we got Miss Belew together, with the team, and made sure that we were legal, staying within the constraints or guardrails of the law, which is easy because most of it's all state law already. Right. And then had John go through and do a policy audit and come up with a policy, and we worked our tail off on learning it and teaching it to the other board reps, and we gave opportunity to all the other trustees to take part in it. Some didn't. And
did you receive a lot of pushback from the two not on the team or superintendents or the community?
Still to this day. Now I will say this: we do have the thing about putting in policy that's based on principle and is focused. It's, if you don't do that, because it works both ways, right? So TASBY is manipulative, but a school board that says, hey, we want our superintendent, we want you to do X, Y, and Z, but you don't really define X, Y, and Z for them, that's not fair to them. Nobody wants to work in that environment. So being able to give them a very clear and precise map saying, here's our expectations, here's what this board directive is as a body corporate, we voted it in, now you go out and you develop the tactics and hire or put together your team with the people who've already on staff to implement those tactics to meet our educational strategy. Like, we're going to throw the ball, you go catch it, go get it, bring it back, and that's how we're going to do this. And that's what we did with these policies, and most of them are focusing on back to the basics.
So that's where I want to go. So when Brandon and the Midland team, the majority of them came to you, and you did an audit and you found bad regulations, bad policies, can you give us a couple examples examples of policies that they were utilizing that were nonsense, not good for kids, or whatever.
Okay. Well, we adopted 31 reformative policies in one night. So
That's a lot.
It was a big night
Yeah.
in Midland. And they were basically divided into thirds.
Okay.
A third, I will say, were just bringing Midland into compliance on some issues.
Okay.
They were results of commissioners' rules, court cases, things really not. It was just bringing it into compliance. So that third took care of
policies.
that. Yes.
Okay.
It's a stack.
All right.
The second third really dealt with social-based issues. We took care and codified into their policy things like gender-based bathrooms, sex-based bathrooms,
So in Midland ISD,
inappropriate instructional materials, just all those kind of good things.
Safety for children.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So just to confirm, so y'all brought in policy that in Midland ISD that children must go to the bathroom of their biological sex.
Yes.
Based on their birth certificate.
Wonderful.
And,
That's great.
and we extended that, our work over the past couple of years have found all the ways that policy didn't address. And we address this in Midland, and we address with our other clients things like when we go on overnight trips, field trips or, band trips or whatever.
Boys and girls aren't staring.
We're not staying in different hotel rooms depending on what we identify as and those kind of things, and
that's
just
great.
getting those expectations into policy.
And Midland, everybody just assumes that Midland is super red meat, right-wing conservative. We have 2 board members that didn't vote on policy that did not allow us, that it essentially was going to take the word pedophilia or pedophile out of the code, and we were going to use the terminology minor attracted persons.
They wanted that?
Well, they didn't vote. We changed it and said, no, we're going to use the word pedophile in our policy, and they voted against it.
So I'm laughing because the left has just lost their mind, y'all.
Well, these are they're Republicans.
Oh yeah, that's really crazy. That is wild to try and give some sort of dignity to pedophiles.
They're
Absolute wild.
They're Republicans that one of them is it approaches, and then the other one would be not meets, but neither one of them are at grade level.
Are you sure they're not just people that put an R next to their name because it's the only way you can win in Midland?
Well, I mean, again, we've had reading issues going on for a long, long time, right?
Yes, that is very true.
One of them's a former teacher too.
Oh, okay.
And I'll bring us back to our policies.
Yes.
The final third, which this is where it was just very exciting work, dealt with student outcomes.
Great.
And this was the trifecta that had to come together.
Mm-hmm.
We had an aligned majority board. We had a policy organization that was willing to, do that work as well.
Mm-hmm.
But we also had an informed board council.
Okay, that's where I wanted to come to.
Yes.
So, Kara.
She's the star of the show.
I am not the star of the show.
I'm not going to say it was a disaster, but you encountered some not great policies and some really, really, what I would say, systemic failures that have been perpetuated for a very long time.
When I worked at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, one of the number one things that I worked on, and we were successful with this, and I want to thank everybody at TPPF, it was wonderful when I worked here, was to say how many students are reading at grade level, and you're going to adopt a goal, and you're going to improve the number of students that are reading at grade level. We know if children are not reading well at grade level by 3rd grade, if they leave 3rd grade not reading well, not only the rest of their education negatively impacted, but the rest of their lives are negatively impacted.
97% guarantee they will never catch up.
They're not going to
grade
catch
level.
up.
Right.
They're not going to do well in education. They're not going to do well in life. They're not going to be able to participate in our republic.
Which is, I'm going to interrupt really quick, and because I want to keep hearing what y'all are doing, but I want our viewers to know, because this is something that I am passionate about. The fact that we are moving kids on past the 3rd grade if they cannot read on grade level. It's a mess. We used to have a retention policy in 2008. The same entities that advocate against accountability, against reforms, against parental choices, the same entities that said we should not have a retention policy. It's really mean to hold kids back if they can't read on grade level, which I think is absolutely cruel. And that is something that is going to be a policy initiative here at the foundation, because we have got to say there is no more social promotion. We are not just sending kids on to go and lead a life of failure and lost opportunity and not fulfilling their purpose in life. So I'm glad that you guys are looking at that, because at a state level, we really do need to address retention policy that has been highly successful in other states like Florida, where their low income demographics, specifically those kids that struggle the most, are number one in the nation. But please continue with the great work.
Can I interrupt real quick because I want to ask her a question? Yeah. With that retention policy, it's even worse in the state of Texas, and you can go in, and I voted against this. I was one of 6. This was on the former board, but they give you a grace policy now in extracurricular activities. So if you're in a pre-AP and AP or a dual credit class, if you fail that class, then you get a grace period for 6 weeks. But if you're in general ed, you don't get that grace period. You have to be in pre-AP, AP, or dual credit. And so you've got kiddos that come from that were reading encyclopedias at a young age, who essentially know they're going to be able to pull it off, so they can screw around for 6 weeks and not put in much effort, and then they'll make it up. There's no consequences for them farting around. But then you've got somebody in a general ed class who's really busting their tail, and they're it's just hard. It's they're busting their tail, and they end up with a 68, and they don't get that grace with the grace period. Yeah. And I think that is, you talk about not being equitable. Either if you have a standard, you set that standard, and everybody tries to hit that same standard, or you don't have the standard. What you permit, you promote. And I think so. It goes back to that social promotion. It is until parents, and that's what I hope with this policy and making it digestible to parents, they understand really like how crucial it is and how much learning is not happening in our schools. Start paying attention to where they will have the fortitude to start coming in and being part of the process of saying, no, we're not going to have, little Johnny is not going to be able to play baseball this weekend because he failed. Right. And because I would say that policy of giving everyone a grace period, because they frame it as, oh, well, we're trying to get those kids to reach and take classes that are harder than normal. And it's like, what? Okay, either they can pass the class or they don't. Giving them an
out so that they can fail.
But you can't do it. So it's that really, that it goes all over me when we don't hold kids to expectations. Kid thrives with expectations and boundaries.
Speaking of that, was this a ISD-wide policy or just a specific high school? So I will tell y'all a story about Midland. A couple of years ago, I spoke to a former teacher who had just left the classroom. This was their second career. They were brought to a high school to teach accounting. And this teacher lasted about a semester because, and I was sent screenshots. I was sent and showed me the trainings of, again, I don't know if it was the ISD as a whole or just this high school, but he could not give grades below a 50. He could not hold deadlines. It's this whole equitable enforced grading system that we're seeing a lot now, but this was a couple of years ago, and he sent me screenshots where where administrators were going in and changing grades. He said this was the grade that they received in class, this was the reported grade, and it was because they were being told and trained. I got the screenshots of the PowerPoint presentations where that they couldn't give kids anything below a 50 ever. They could not accept work at any point. There was no such thing as a deadline. If a child failed a test, they had to be given the test as many times as possible until they passed it. And he was so frustrated. He was like, I'm out. I can't teach these kids. I can't hold them accountable. I can't do anything. But I was just really heartbroken. And so was that a policy of the district or of the specific high school? Do you know?
I think that was probably, I'd have to go back and look, but okay. I think there's a policy or was a policy in there that kind of allowed that.
It's everywhere. That. I know it, but this was the first teacher that had brought it to my attention. And then I asked teachers from across Texas and they said, yeah, that's what we do. I can't do this either.
You know, I think one of the most shocking things about this is, of course, we expected, there were going to be detractors and people that didn't agree and had their viewpoints or whatever. But I think what was most shocking, and it happened live in the meeting, but it also happened, in personal texts and different messages where we had community members, teachers, even board members who flat out said, we don't think our kids can do it.
That's right. That crisis of the soft bigotry of low expectations across the board.
Literally, we're saying we shouldn't expect our kids to be performing at grade level. It's okay if they're sitting in DNF schools because we cannot achieve B level. We cannot have schools that are rated by the state of Texas as a B. We just can't achieve it. But what I would say on that note is, to me, this was really about parent and community empowerment.
That's right.
Why? Because the education cabal likes to hide the data.
Yep.
You know, most of our children are not doing well on the SAT or ACT.
Right.
Most of our children are not doing well on any standardized test. Right. Okay, but we don't like to talk about that data and be honest about it. Yeah. But what these policies really do is say to each principal, where are you right now with your kids reading? And on the SAT and ACT, where do you want to be next year? Okay. Let's adopt a goal. Let's make it public. Yep. And let's talk about whether you achieve that goal. And if you didn't achieve that, because we should be continuously improving. Right. Right now, so often what happens in our schools is there's just all this data, but nobody actually knows. From year to year, are your kids reading better? Right. Are things getting better or getting worse?
And it's communicated to the parents.
It's communicated very clearly.
It is codified in this policy to say that it is to be posted at the front of the school, in the principal's office, and it's supposed to be sent and communicated to the parents
in an understandable format, so that parents can say, because you want to empower parents to say, I'm looking at this data and what it is telling me, and there's no clear data right now that says this to them. I'm looking at this data, and what it's telling me is that 55% of the children at this school are not reading at grade level. Right. And mine's one of them. What are you going to do about it?
So what are you going to do? So that's my next question. So what are you doing? What policy to train teachers so that they may teach children to read? What are you doing at Midland that ideally you'd like to go and teach every district, right? To be able to do. Okay, so what are you doing to actually change that?
So here's I want to take this first. First off, that is, in my opinion, the way that I infer the law, that is outside the scope. That is the operational control of the superintendent. I tell them I want our kids to be reading at 70%. I feel as though I have to give them direction, and we work together on it to come up with what policies or curriculum and pedagogies we want. But I don't really care what our superintendent and her staff does. I think the most important piece, I guess, on a policy perspective is we really worked, and there were great ideas put into this policy that started at the campus level that said, we need buy-in from campus leadership. You come up with the curriculum, the pedagogies, the ancillary learning tools that you need to get your kids to move from 20 to 40 in 12 months or a school year or what have you. But we stay out of it because that's the part where you start blending in to where we don't work for the school district, right? That's too much time. We're too in the weeds. If we start, now as far as curriculum, developing like Bluebonnet, there's all kinds of different things that you can look at it from that standpoint. But I don't go in there and go, are we going to use Pearson or Hufflin, whatever it is, what publishers we're going to use. I want to make sure that whatever publisher we're using is staying true to the values of Midland, which is not the controversial issues. It's not the gender, this weird gender transformation stuff. But as far as like getting in their details, I think it's important to be able to differentiate the role of the operational aspect of it and the governance side, because we should be governing it from a board of directors standpoint. The way that I feel about it is we hired a CEO, and we have to show that CEO, we're not going to sit here and micromanage you, but we are going to hold you accountable for making the results. Either you either improve student outcomes or you don't, and you have a short window to get there. I think this whole thing with, turnaround, it takes a long time. It's, you've got to be here for, that's another framing they like to say, oh, well, I just got here. I haven't had time. And I'm like, look, you've been here long enough. Like, I wouldn't let you run my company like that. I mean, I give you 3 months.
So then, okay, so what guidance was given? Kara, you're the education policy expert. what guidance was given
Digestible.
to help turn this around?
What I really try to train, and I work with boards all across the state, and what I really try to talk to them about is you're the visionary, you're the community member who's bringing the vision of the community. What is your vision for your community? There's not a single board member that's going to say, my vision for my community is that none of my kids can read and they're graduating from high school ill-equipped to participate in our republic or have a job. You know, I mean, we're literally talking about basic skills. So when you say to the board, what is your vision? Okay, we want a lot of kids reading. And then you say, all right, how many kids were reading last year? You ask the superintendent and the principals to say how many kids are going to be reading next year.
Okay.
And then they set that goal, and it is a public goal and everybody knows it. And we're like, as the president said, we want this to be so transparent. When you walk into a school, you can see our reading goal for next year is this number. This percentage of our children are going to be reading.
Okay.
And then you ask the school system to do the things it needs to do to make sure that goal is met.
Okay.
And if it's not met, it's not that you're going to necessarily do anything radical, but what you are going to do is say, you promised us this goal. We agreed this goal was reasonable. Why didn't you meet it? What do we need to do differently to meet it next time?
Okay.
So you're never sitting there just saying year after year things are the same or getting worse, and we're not going to do anything about it.
And we're chasing an asymptote on it. I mean, we're never. I want to say one thing. So for me, success. So to kind of, I guess, to give you a better answer of what you were asking, what are we going to do? The mission statements and vision statements from the district level are pretty. They're like a corporate platitude that you'd see in a conference room. So for me, you know, when we were talking about this earlier, what success means is for me locally, right? MISD students should be able to master communication for developing, analyzing, expressing, and defending their ideas and belief. And they should be able to well-written, crafted arguments with coherent understanding and smooth transitions, speaking clearly and purposefully, visualizing and understanding spatial relationships in line with physics, and solving and explaining numerical statements, including statistical analysis. Those are I think that is a general education. That is, if you can do those things, and I'm not saying you have to go be a physicist, but those are my goals. My personal goals for education is to get all kids, my nephews, his nephew, everybody's nephews at that level to be able to go off and pursue and thrive in whatever it is that you choose to do when the time comes for choosing. But so and how the administration and superintendent achieves those four things, for me, I don't really care how they do. Let me rephrase that. I do care. I don't want it to go against our principles and our values and our moral codes or what have you, but what tools they use, whether they use this publisher or this, I don't have a brand preference, right? I just want to be able to go to the mall and have a discussion with a 17-year-old and not contemplating running my car into a concrete column, when I leave.
That would be nice.
I think some of the beauty of the policies, and Kara's alluded to this, is nailing down that data piece.
Yeah.
In a very digestible chunks.
Okay.
But there's so much data out there,
right,
that school administrators are notorious for, I'm going to go find the one good indicator in this pile of data and I'm going to run with it.
Yep.
And I'm going to show, we're doing great, or we're going, when really the data that matters is
the STAR test.
Are our kids?
It is the STAR test.
Can they read on grade level?
Yeah.
Well, and as part of my training, and this is something that I've been working on for years. When you watch school boards, and I watch them in Texas and nationally, they will talk. I mean, any school board meeting, and I've watched hundreds of them and worked with hundreds of school board members, they will talk endlessly because they're told to, not because they don't want to do a great job, but because they're told to. They will talk endlessly about buildings and cafeterias, and is the busing schedule working? Okay. But they're not told or trained, this is how many kids can read. And this is how you run a system as a leader, a community leader with a vision to ensure that you are improving reading every single time.
Right.
But it really is a travesty. I mean, a travesty that we have school boards that board meeting after board meeting do not talk about if children are learning in their schools. And so it starts with just helping those board members understand that they have to focus on student learning, and they have to almost have a relentless pursuit, or I would say we think it's even a mission from God to help your children do better year after year.
And where this comes full circle, and where you start breaking apart this cabal, is this machine that is identifying superintendents.
Correct.
Who's hiring the superintendents, because all of these things.
Who is placing the superintendents?
Well, a good share of those placements do come from TASBY.
Right. TASBY has a massive executive search firm, and they do their executive search, and they are placing the superintendents. I'm pretty sure they placed the woman that came out of California into Midland several years ago, who then moved over to Fort Worth, and then, as we all know, is not working and receiving nearly $1 million.
They placed a lot.
They placed a lot.
Well, when you're doing those searches, the search firm is critical in negotiating that contract where the superintendent's performance metrics are outlined.
What do you think the top performance metrics that they look at when they are placing? Because I know when I've looked into this, what I can see when I look into a superintendent's, even just online bio, like here's who I am, here's what I do. And I know what I see is what one of their top line is. What do you see from your...
I see...
Can I cut in?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So that's a trick question, right? Because his perspective is going to be he's got missing information.
Okay.
Because in your local communities, what you have is you have your economic development corporations, you have your city council, you have your nonprofits, you have your foundations, you have all these different entities, and the point of education for some folks, and I'm somewhere in the middle, is economic development, training a workforce. I believe that there should be a utility in education, but my purpose for having an educated populace is not just so somebody
that's a byproduct of having it
if
well
you're educated, the probability of you being a good employee is high. But our EDC, all those stakeholders are myopically focused on a workforce, right? And so they come in and they put pressure on trustees and different wherever they can put pressure points on, hey, we want this type of superintendent, and we want them to be focused on these different metrics. They come in from usually a Fortune 100 kind of boardroom viewpoint, which does not usually align with the values and principles of local Midlanders. And so you've got that pressure coming on, and so then the board feels pressure. They've been gaslit essentially to say, oh, well, we're not education experts, we don't have any knowledge base, all these things. So we're going to hire an outside consulting company to come in and do a superintendent search or a headhunter, and then it goes to TASBY. And the thing with T, and this is a huge differentiator between T and everyone else, and I hope you don't get, because my wife will say, you just love saying that. Mr. Petree works for us as the board. Right. He works, so it's in a partnership, but he reports to the board. Right. Corporate, and TASBY does not do that. So what we decide as a board corporate or strategic mission or metrics that we want for a superintendent, I'm going to tell Mr. Petree, number one, we love our superintendent, Dr. Howard. She is on board with this, so that's wonderful. Do not play the telephone game, but. If that instance, we would go to Mr. Petree and say, these are the things we're looking at, and he's going to go out and T, or their searching firm is going to look for us based on what we want, not about protecting their market share and controlling the cabal of education. That's why I cannot stand TASBY for that reason. They control their market share. They employ psychological manipulation tactics, and they need to go the way of the dinosaurs, and they need to go that way quick.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm thrilled to hear that your superintendent is on board, because I want to be clear, there are a lot of great superintendents. There are the majority of administrators, although we have far too many, but teachers and things like that. They are good people that want to do the right thing for children. I think you hit on it. There's a cabal, and there's a profit motive. Just so our viewers understand, we just added an additional $8.5 billion on top of the $100 billion that we spent last year. And just so everyone knows, that is $18,122 per child. When you look at expenditures, that is from the TEA. There is no outside entity making up or fudging numbers. That is what the TEA reports is being spent across the board. That is a massive amount of money. And the profiteer class that has alternative motives, and I hit on it a little earlier, the architecture, engineering, engineering construction firms, many of whom are being purchased by private equity, because our taxpayers are being seen as the golden goose that keeps delivering, the golden eggs. This is why our property taxes are going up, and up, because they are selling districts on the idea of you need a Taj Mahal football facility. I mean, Crowley ISD just said that they were going to build a $150 million track and field facility. I mean, that is absolutely insane. Of course, VLK Architects, one of the largest architecture firms in the state, is behind that. And so there's that profit motive, and it is crippling taxpayers, and it does nothing to serve students. So my trick question that you said to
football stadiums, build new facilities is sexy. That's gets you reelected.
So I've heard. Yes, I understand. And that blows my mind, because taxpayers they are begging, they are pleading. They cannot afford to stay in their homes. And our kids, forget about it. If we keep running up this debt, they can't buy homes because property taxes are far more than what mortgages are going to be.
They can't even read to get a job at that point.
Well, you add it all together, and it is not looking good. And so you said it was a trick question. It's not. I want for people to understand that I'm so thrilled that you all now have a great superintendent that's working in partnership, that's committed to this. But far too many are their headline, their top line on their bio says, "Passed this bond." And that is how they are being placed, is because they passed this bond.
Well, I'll tell you.
Passed that bond. It just came out earlier today that the executives in the 100 of the top paid people in Houston ISD are making over $180,000 a year.
Well, it's fine.
As a board member, I was in the interview process with superintendents, and I asked the same, there was some difference, but then you have your standard questions. And I said, I want whoever comes into MISD, I want them to focus on academics first, and then we'll talk about the bond. And they all told me they would do that, and then they focused on the bond.
That's right.
And and now we have academic failure year over year. We have it is going to be a very, very big challenge. But I think if you want to drill down to the number one most important thing a local community can do is hire trustees or elect trustees who literally don't care about getting reelected. I could care less about getting reelected. I was elected to represent my constituents for the 4 years I was there, and I don't care. And I have to be better about my wake that I leave for others, but it's a learning process.
So before we wrap up, this has been amazing. I feel like we could talk all day about what we do to fix it. So you all laid out the data. It's kind of ugly.
No, so I want to go on the day. This is an important piece of it. So as a board member, you'll come in and you'll say, hey, where are we at? And so it depends on the day, depends on the board meeting, where you're at in the year. But they'll say, well, beginning of year, mid-year, benchmark, NWA map testing, wherever it is. All that stuff is great tool for people in that world. But from a governance standpoint, the only thing that I care about, the only thing that matters is our kids reading at grade level from the STAR. And Republicans have been convinced now that standardized testing is evil and abhorrent and all these things. And they're wrong on it too. We should stop scaring our kids of taking a test. If you would become a plumber, guess what? You got to take a journeyman's test. You got to take a master's test.
And you got to know
electrician.
math.
You better know right angle trig. The people that are running our Mazak 550 and Yamaseki Lays have to know right angle trig. So being scared to take are they being tested too young? Whatever. I mean, there's all these different arguments on it. But so one of the things that T and Miss Belew did and highlighted was to make this digestible. We only have two colors. Red or green. You're either hitting the metric or you're not hitting the metric, and we move on. And another important piece of this is this is data analytics, and it should be used as a tool for continuous improvement, not to weaponize and not get people, because now accountability has been framed like this pejorative word. If you say, I'm gonna hold you accountable, everyone's like, oh my God, that's you're a terrible person. Well, we need to change the narrative on it, because being held accountable it doesn't mean, it's just like we do in our businesses. Did you hit your revenue numbers, or did we protect our margins? No, we didn't do so great this week, but we're not going to fire anyone. We just need to know what tools and resources do you need to be more successful in what it is. And the way that this template, we specifically said we want it this template this way, 2 colors, and this is what we want presented to the board.
So when someone is not meeting it, I say it's because there's a lot of red, and that breaks
it's going
my
to get
heart.
worse.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It breaks my heart. There's a lot of red, but this is what's going on in Texas. It's not just Midland. Let's be clear. We're not picking on Midland. You're just willing to say the quiet parts out loud that everybody else is shoveling under the rugs, which means in the not too distant future, we're going to see massive gains because you have got to look at the problems and fix it. So what are they going to do to fix it?
I mean, I really do think it starts with it's fun to talk about the fancy buildings and our wonderful stadiums and things like this. But at the end of the day, even though these are terribly tough conversations, everybody, parents, community members, have to get radically transparent about, can their kids read? Are reading results going up or down? Yep. And how is the school system going to ensure that on a continuous basis more children are reading? Mm-hmm. And it is an imperative, not just for Texas, it is for our nation. We have to change the situation around.
And the policies outline the process, beginning with selecting high quality curriculum that the board is the ultimate governing body about. So you select the curriculum. This board empowered the superintendent to hire the team that he or she best sees fit to deliver these results. Mm-hmm. And then they get to work. And then the data comes, and if it's not meeting the mark, that's when those conversations start.
These policies are a complete system from the boardroom to the classroom 100%. To align everybody in the entire system toward achieving better reading, math results for students. And I mean, we have a lot of, I can get into details, but there's a lot of little things in here. For example, if the school system gets lower than a B, so if we have students sitting in a school that is rated a C, D, or F, the superintendent is required to come up with a plan to improve results at that school.
Great.
Every child in the state of Texas deserves to be sitting in an A or B school. Many legislators yesterday received notifications from TEA that they had many school systems in their district that are F schools. Yep. Those are real children sitting year after year in a classroom where they are not learning.
100%.
That is not fair.
Yeah.
Not only are they real children, but those are the future leaders, the future governor, the future attorney, the future dentist, the future doctor, future whatever it is. AI is not going to save us from all things, right? Mm-hmm. But I want to make it, and this is another shout out to T, because TASBY in your trainings will not tell you this, because we're talking about what are we going to do with academics? Well, we're going to start enforcing state law. Under subchapter D, powers and duties of board trustees of independent school districts, section 11.1515, oversight of academic achievement. The board of trustees of an independent school district or the governing body of an open enrollment charter school shall provide oversight regarding student academic achievement and strategic leadership for maximizing student performance. It does not say anything about a superintendent, anyone else. It is the board of trustees. That is a responsibility and duty of the board of trustees, and you will not learn that unless you read the code yourself.
And I really appreciate bringing that up, because Texas law right now, and this is one thing that we talked about with these policies, Texas law right now requires school boards to be very carefully setting metrics for kids and watching to ensure that they're reading and doing well. That's one of the number one obligations if you read the Texas Education Code. Yeah. Yet when our newly elected school board members come on board, they're not even told your number one obligation is this. Yep. Nothing else matters but this, really.
Is this discussed? So at your public meetings, are you all stating where children are?
Yes, sometimes, but until now that we've codified these new policies,
when did this start?
It's been all over the map this last month.
May.
So we're new. So basically,
yes.
In a year, in 2 years, we can come back and see. And
but
this
really,
is going to be
even
lots
at the
of
next, even at the next board meeting, there's going to start being very transparent reports.
Good.
Where the parents, the community, the board members can understand, how did we do last year?
Yeah.
Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? What's the goal for the year after this? this. And so, and this was an excellent point that was brought up. There's always this idea that we have to wait 5 years for things to turn around. I'm sorry, our children don't have their entire elementary education. You can start right now by saying what's going on right now and how are you going to make it better next year? And let's just tell the truth. Let's just be clear with the data.
Right.
In the state of Texas right now, about 50% of children are reading below grade level.
Correct.
Period. That's millions of children. Let's just tell the truth about it. And then once you start accepting the truth and empowering parents and the board to make decisions, then they can start saying, okay, what's the plan to get better?
Yep.
One other loophole that these policies close is it eliminates the stall tactic of what about all the scores that are being rescored or that they're delayed or this or that, all these things, and we just keep pushing it out. And these policies call for, we want to know, to Kara's point,
even if you
where
have to
are we
estimate,
at right now?
where are we?
Where
Just
are we?
estimate, and then you can say, we're in green, we're doing better, we're in red, we're doing worse.
Yeah.
Right.
And what are we going to do about it?
And when the public yells at you about this, number one, you prove to them you're not weaponizing this, that you're using it as a data analytical tool to give resources and tools for continuous improvement. But the other important piece of this, I believe, is for clarity. And I think that there's a lot of superintendents, because they too have been trained by TASBY and TAS and all this, that I think that there's just a lot of noise and lost in translation communication. And once the board of trustees, there's going to be some bumpy roads, right? You got to get out away from the breakers, right? But once you can get over those breakers by developing trust with your superintendent, you can kind of re-educate them on, hey, you can do this. We want to empower you to come to work and be excited. Like, obviously you have a passion for kids. We don't want you to fail, but this information isn't going to be used to harm you, right? And right now, I think that they have been told by the worst organization, most pointless, useless organization on planet Earth, run by useless executive director, Texas Association of School Boards, who's a former superintendent, who just protects his market share and does nothing, no work, zero work does that person do. And so they have just been indoctrinated for so long, over and over again, not to trust the trustees, and that they also, it's like this false, it's cockiness and not confidence that they've been developed through these tactics. And so I really think a lot of this is just professional communication. Sure, TASBY and these professional headhunters, you've got to push back on your Chamber of Commerce, economic development. You've got to push back against the suits for sure. But you have to build trust with them as well. But I really think that the board of trustees, if you have a good board, builds a relationship and kind of educates the superintendent, you can really make sustainable systemic changes that focus on the basics. But it's going to not be fun until you get out over the breakers and people develop trust. Because TASBY, I just cannot emphasize enough how manipulative TASBY, they're literally like a brainwashing, like it's a cult. It's literally, if you look at the signs that you belong to a cult, and then you look at what TASBY does, it is literally, I'm like, man, I would never go to TASBY and drink Kool-Aid. Ever, 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 ever.
So and to bring it full circle, kind of where we started when we talked about, TASBY trains you, or, it's in the code that we hire the superintendent and we approve the budget. This is now providing us the data to do that. What kind of superintendent do we need? How do we need to allocate our budget?
What are our values? And are we going to make sure that superintendent aligns, not just with our academic values, but with the social values that are embedded in here? One thing that we didn't mention, but that's very important in these policies, is what books are being shown to our children.
Yes.
We want to restrict pornography and access to materials that are inappropriate, especially for young children.
Yes.
And that's another thing these policies do. But we just really at T want to empower every school board board member to feel equipped and ready to be a great leader in their community and really help their kids. And that's what our training, we worked very hard on these policies. That's what these policies are about. And we feel like many school board members could benefit from hearing about it.
So for our viewers that are school board members or married to or talking to or going to the school board, if they agree with all of us at this table that TASBY is a disaster for actual kids in the education system, and they want to step out and they want to come and do an audit like you've done and figure out which board policies that they've been guided towards by board book, if they want to do that, what is their first step in saying, I don't want what TASBY's offering, I want to explore what T offers? They come to your website, they can call you. Tell us where they come and learn about you.
Absolutely. You can visit our website at texansforexcellence.org. Email us at info@texansforexcellence.org. Okay. And we will be happy to reach out to you. Our phone numbers and other various emails are posted there. Mm-hmm. Just get a hold of us through one of those channels, and we would be happy to have the conversation.
And do school boards save money when they're using you versus TASBY?
Absolutely. You know, there are some products that you have as much as a 50% savings on there, and then we just try to be, just as a nonprofit, we're not about making profit. You know, that's a stark difference. You know, we are about keeping money in the classrooms, providing teachers the resources that they need to reach our kids, not about lining our own pocketbooks.
I want to jump in on the price real quick, because I'm gonna help John Petree out on this selling Texans.
Help him sell how amazing this is for schools, kids, and taxpayers.
So number one, if you're serious about developing a relationship with subject matter experts and people that are going to be working for you as a school board, mm-hmm. They come to you. They're working directly for the school board of trustees. Yeah. Then you need to give T the opportunity to prove themselves. But the other issue that I have, because the money thing, we spend so much money on education, it's ridiculous. You look at all these districts and they go, oh well, they bring up the cost. Say you end up spending $20,000, $30,000 on it. Who cares? I mean, because when the same communities that pass multi-billion-dollar bonds on facilities, you're telling me that you don't have any type of budget constraints on building these monstrosities in your communities that you're going to be paying on for a minimum of at least 30 years. Yeah. And you're not going to hire subject matter experts that are reporting and working directly with the trustees, who are legally defined separately in Texas law than a regular representative, because we hold and sell real property. Yeah. I mean, spend the money and it's an investment in T to get people on your side that work for you, that don't have a conflict of interest, because the board of trustees is a separate entity than the district, and people don't realize that. They're we've all got to be kumbaya together. Absolutely, you want everyone pick up the rope and pull the same direction to get kids to read, but you do not. We hold the power, and I think to make the investment, it is. I think that there's a case to make that you are not you're not a good financial steward, or you're not even. So we have fiduciary responsibilities and obligations, and if you're not willing to make the investment by hiring people who are working directly with the trustee strategy because of $25,000, and you've got $3 billion worth of principal and interest coming, then you shouldn't be on the board. Somebody needs to run against you and fire you.
Yeah. Well, y'all, this has been absolutely amazing.
Best money we've ever spent, John. Best money we've ever spent.
I love to hear it. I'm so excited. Kara, I'd love to see what you all have put together. As much as it's disheartening to know that if we looked across the board, not obviously just at Midland ISD, but across the state of Texas, there's a whole lot of kids in the red. There's a whole lot of kids that are being set up to fail. And we can't do it anymore. And I'm thrilled to see this partnership. I can't wait to see next year and the year after. I hope you guys will come back and share the results and the incredible gains that Midland ISD is making. I am hopeful that more and more districts will recognize they can sever that chain that has locked them to an entity that is all about the system, maintaining their power, their lobbying, their profiteers, as opposed to doing what's best for our children. I appreciate all of you for joining us today on Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin, and now you have the power.